Welcome, everyone. My name is Sarah Ray for the Bloomfield Public Library. Thank you for joining us today for another exciting program with Shana. Happy Valentine's Day. We thought this would be a great program for today to talk about sugar cravings. So I'm going to turn this over to Shana to introduce herself and let us know what to expect.
Thank you. Yes, happy Valentine's Day, everyone. We thought that this would be a perfect topic for today. So I'm Shana Griffin. I'm a registered dietitian nutritionist. I'm also an integrative and functional nutrition certified practitioner. That is a mouthful, but essentially what I do is I help people to eat well and be happy, getting to the root of your problems. So today we're going to talk about tackling sugar cravings. We're going to talk about, what sugar is. I'm going to discuss added sugar. I'm going to talk about how sugar affects you and your body. I'm going to discuss a little bit about the difference between sugar craving and addiction, the biochemistry. I'm going to talk about gut health. If you know me, you know I'm always going to talk about gut health no matter what the topic is. I'm going to talk about ways on fighting cravings, foods to include. I am going to talk about supplements at the end, and then we're going to leave some time for questions and answers at the very end. So first and foremost, what is sugar? Sugar are carbohydrates. All carbohydrates break down to sugar. And you've probably heard simple sugars and simple sugars and complex carbohydrates. Simple sugars are what we refer to as the processed and refined foods, such as candy, table sugar, and some fruits. And so that includes when you see on a label or read about glucose, fructose, and galactose are all considered simple carbohydrates. And then carbohydrates are those things that have more of the whole fiber intact. And they include two or more of those simple carbohydrates chemically bonded together. And if anyone's ever taken a chemistry class, then you've probably learned about what that means. But those would be things like peas, beans, whole grains, vegetables like potatoes, and even sweet potatoes. You can see the picture on the right-hand side of the screen, some very basic examples of complex carbs versus simple carbohydrates. So there is a difference between natural sugar and added sugar. And added sugar really is what we should be focusing on limiting in the diet. And if you've heard me speak before, probably have discussed, and again, most of the topics around healthy eating in general generally involve a quick discussion of added sugar. And the magic number that we want to be looking for limiting added sugar is 24 grams. And so added sugar would be, like I mentioned, things that are processed, like table sugar, or anything on a food label that would say high fructose corn syrup, brown sugar corn syrup, raw sugar, malt syrup, maple syrup, pancake syrup, fructose. Anything that you see on a label that ends in OSC is going to be some kind of sugar in general. So if you see that on there, know that you got to put the investigation glasses on and investigate exactly what type of sugar that is. So 24 grams of added sugar in a day is what we should be limiting. And natural sugar means that it's naturally occurring in the food. So things like fruit, 100% fruit juice, honey, molasses, or milk. Lactose is the natural sugar that's found in milk, and fructose is the natural sugar found in fruit. To explain that added 24-gram limit per day for the dietary guidelines for Americans, this is a picture of the new nutrition facts label. It's not really necessarily new, I guess. It's been around for several years now. But I think that there's confusion. As a dietitian, I feel like a common question I get is, well, when I'm looking at sugar at a food label, is it what am I looking at when it comes to the total sugar versus the added sugar here? And so total sugar, if this was, let's say this is an example of, it's not an example of yogurt, but let's use a flavored yogurt, for example. If we're looking at a strawberry flavored yogurt and it says that there's 10 grams of added sugar in that, then that means 10 grams of added sugar, like additional, maybe like a strawberry syrup, maybe an artificial strawberry flavor of some sort, added actual cane sugar into here. Maybe it's maple syrup or honey, which would be considered an added sugar in this particular food product, so yogurt. Then the other couple of grams that would be left of that, the 2 grams would be naturally occurring lactose sugar. So for a total of 12 grams of sugar and 10 grams of added. If you're looking at a plain yogurt, for example, and there's no added flavorings or sugar added to it, then it's going to say 12, or let's say 10 grams of sugar and 0 grams of added sugar. The 10 grams of sugar in there would be the naturally occurring sugar from the lactose. And the sugar content of yogurt can differ depending on whether it's full fat, low fat, Greek, regular yogurt, skyr, different types of processed, different types of yogurt. So you'll see all different kinds of numbers when you're looking at there, but ultimately what you'd want to choose is one that would be as close to 0 grams of added sugar per day for that particular yogurt. Here is a picture that shows how many sugar cubes. So each sugar cube is considered a teaspoon, and each teaspoon has 4 grams of added sugar in it. So this just gives you a visualization of how much sugar is in various foods, from ice creams to drinks to cereals and yogurt, for example. So just take a look at that, and you can see where if one of those cubes is 4 grams, the average amount that you should be limiting is 24, approximately 6 sugar cubes. So in one of those, that one Coca-Cola or that ice cream that you see, or the McDonald's drink there, are all far exceeding that limit in just that one particular item in your entire day. So when we think of sugar cravings, and maybe you've done a little bit of research or you've read somewhere, sugar is addicting, I want to just say that the research is inconclusive on this topic in regards to sugar addiction or a sugar addiction diagnosis. That doesn't exist. There needs to be more research that is compiled to really come up with a comprehensive approach for addressing the actual verbiage of sugar addiction. What we do know is that addiction is fueled by a chemical reaction in the brain, causing cravings, and it has there's an overflow of dopamine across various regions of the brain, building up a tolerance and creating a craving for sweeter and sweeter, more and more types of feelings. So sugar craving is defined as an intense desire to seek something sweet, whereas an addiction would be more of a medical diagnosis, and like I mentioned, is inconclusive. So does sugar cravings feel like an addiction for some individuals? Maybe, but as far as the research, we really aren't going to be using that verbiage. Some things that you can maybe ask yourself as a self-assessment, answering true or false to these things, would be considered having very, very strong sugar craving feelings. So if you answer true to any of these things, then you're definitely experiencing more of an abnormal sugar craving feeling that really probably should be addressed and looked at a deeper level. So how you might feel if you are feeling sick and tired of being sick and tired, or how you might feel if you are experiencing sugar cravings. And this is interesting because it's like the chicken or the egg. Some of these symptoms may be exacerbated by the indulgence of higher sugary foods because of the sugar cravings, and then vice versa. So feeling headaches and migraines, insomnia, foggy thinking, just feeling generally cranky, hangry, lethargic, having muscle aches and joint pains, body aches, weight gain, all can be feelings of symptoms of sugar cravings. Feeling stressed, feeling bored or tired, procrastinating mindlessly can lead to those feelings of sugar cravings because it's habitual. So really important to become mindful about your day, what you're consuming, and these feelings that you're feeling and where they're really truly coming from. Now, if you search the internet and go to Dr. Google, you're going to find a lot of promising nutrition advice as far as different food groups. Today, we're just going to really be talking about sugary foods, not food cravings in general, but you're going to find a lot of information. And I think that I just would like to say that it's a bit more complicated, and certainly it's more personalized than just this chart. So if you're seeking sugary foods, these aren't necessarily what your body needs, and then the things that you're going to eat that's going to help with that. I think it's very promising to read these types of things, but there's really not a lot of evidence to support some of them, although there are some of them. Some of them do have evidence or efficacy with science, evidence-based research behind them, and I'm going to talk about that in just a little bit. But as far as being a registered dietitian, an integrative and functional practitioner, we like to use a systems biology matrix approach to addressing everybody's individual needs. What one thing works for one person isn't going to work for another. And the reason why one person may be experiencing something isn't the reason that another person is experiencing something similar, and how each individual systems biology systems biology core imbalances all integrate and affect each other, just like you see in this chart. So everything from an environmental lifestyle, from looking at different metabolic pathways and networks within the body and different core imbalances and how that impacts biomarkers and signs and symptoms. Everything is integrated within each other. The food, there's also, putting this together, I'm thinking about the food mood connection and how it's all connected. I have done previous lectures on this in the past. Maybe it's something we want to revisit again in the future, because it really is so important. Food affects your mood, and your mood affects your food choices. So they go hand in hand with each other. And so I'm trying not to keep today about food mood. It really, truly is going to be about sugar cravings, but keep in mind that there's a lot of additional information involved in how, in the food mood connection. So let's talk about causes of sugar cravings. What causes sugar cravings? Dips and fluctuations in your blood sugar is one of the key drivers to sugar cravings. That could be not having too many carbohydrates and not enough healthy protein and fat in the meal that could cause that crash. Not having enough calories in the first place could also affect that. If you're not eating enough and then later in the day you're wondering why you're having cravings for sugar, it might be because you just really didn't eat enough of the right foods. Versus maybe eating too much and kind of going on that blood sugar roller coaster. Nutrient deficiencies, specifically magnesium, is linked to sugar cravings. So if you're deficient, then we'd want to look at that. Dehydration, huge. Most people are dehydrated, and I should also put on here, actually, obviously dehydration can cause you to feel fatigued and tired, and it's the mid-afternoon slump and you're thinking to yourself that you're hungry, but really what you are is you're thirsty. You just need some hydration. Now, this could go in the opposite direction also, because if you are somebody who is on a challenge with themselves to incorporate more hydration and you're drinking a lot of water in excess and you're not repleting your body with colorful fruits and vegetables and electrolytes, then you could be depleting your body of too many electrolytes, causing feelings of fatigue, tired, run down, where your body now feels like, oh, I'm tired. I've kind of shifted down a couple of years and I'm not feeling great. I need fuel. I need something. And so your brain is telling you you need glucose. And really maybe what it really is that you're just depleting your body of some electrolytes. So, drinking too much water is never a good thing without a good balance of electrolytes and nutrient dense foods in the diet, but also dehydration. Just negative sugar related lifestyle habits can be a vicious cycle. Stress is definitely a key driver here for sugar craving. Boredom, just out of habit. Maybe it's a nighttime thing, maybe it's an afternoon thing. Boredom in general and habits can cause feelings of sugar cravings. And then lack of sleep, social environment, the modern environment, marketing, grocery shopping, the bakery department is to blame, I think, for some people's impulse buying, right? You go into the grocery store and you smell those freshly baked chocolate chip cookies and now you want to buy them. So certainly marketing and the modern environment can drive some of those. Here's a picture of how your blood sugars should be controlled over the course of the day. The goal is to keep stable blood sugars and eliminate or limit, the ups and downs spikes. So eating too many carbohydrates per meal or skipping meals and restricting calories or carbohydrates or exercise on an empty stomach can make your body dip down too low to where now you're feeling some cravings. So we really ultimately want to keep this in check. Here's another picture of that sugar roller coaster. Your body is increasing serotonin and different endorphins and blood sugars. So your energy rises, your mood lifts, and then as your pancreas produces insulin in response to glucose in the body and in response to carbohydrate breakdown in the body. The sugars come back down with the insulin taking that glucose and shuttling it into the muscles and into where it needs to go. Anything that's in excess will go and be stored as fat. So then it brings them back down, and then you start feeling hungry again and fatigued and maybe some brain fog, and it's kind of a vicious cycle when this isn't being regulated appropriately with balanced diet and a good, well-functioning internal body system. So that is the start of essentially insulin resistance. About 40% of the population has insulin resistance, and most of which aren't aware that they have insulin resistance. And that is a condition where insulin becomes less effective at lowering blood sugar, and your body's inability of producing insulin to facilitate that glucose uptake into the cell because of poor insulin binding at the insulin receptor. So overuse and overproduction, constant production of that can wear out your pancreas essentially and lead to impaired glucose tolerance, which occurs when your blood sugars rise up above that normal range and the pancreas continues to overproduce that insulin. And then that's where you see that rise, that spike in blood sugars, even after your meals or when in a fasting state. And so that then can lead to prediabetes, which to diagnose prediabetes, your fasting blood glucose would be anywhere between 100 and 126 as far as being diagnosed. And to be diagnosed with diabetes type 2, I don't have that on the screen, but you would need 2 consecutive fasting blood glucoses that would be over 126 milligram per deciliter, would be how they diagnose diabetes. And so prediabetes is when the pancreas overproduces the insulin, no longer able to keep that fasting blood glucose at normal level. And so what is the underlying root cause of insulin resistance? So there's a lot. As you can see here on the screen, it's everything from poor diet to lack of physical activity to food allergies and sensitivities, which can lead to, or just, dysbiosis, leaky gut, the gut biota imbalance of that can lead to insulin resistance, digestive insufficiencies, oxidative stress and mitochondrial dysfunction, stress, lack of sleep, hormone imbalances, nutrient deficiencies, genetic predispositions or SNPs is what you might see that referred to as, food additives and obesity. And when it comes to obesity as a diagnosis, once somebody is obese, then it becomes more challenging to reverse insulin resistance, but usually it's probably the insulin. It could potentially be insulin resistance that then leads to obesity. So a lot of these things, like I mentioned, it's kind of like the chicken or the egg, which one is coming first here out of all of these things, and they all play a factor. And just another reason why to drive home the basis of really adapting just a healthy lifestyle in general, and mastering that as your key base to improving your entire life. On the right hand side of the screen here, you're going to see a picture of the stress response in the body, from acute stress to chronic stress, and how that is impacted by your brain and neurotransmitters, your adrenals. And your adrenals produce cortisol in response to stress. So acute stress is natural. It's a part of life. It's actually healthy. It's good to have some acute stress in life. So those would be some of the acute stress responses that you would see in response to adrenaline and cortisol being produced. But what really becomes the problem is the chronic stress. So chronic stress leads to, as you see on the screen, all of those different issues, from fatigue to gut health to hormone imbalance to sleep problems to thyroid issues to chronic disease to blood sugar imbalances, mood changes, so forth and so on. So I know there's no easy button for just getting rid of chronic stress in our lives, but that is a huge key role in how our bodies function biochemically. So to just talk a little bit about some of the hormones that play a role in sugar cravings, for women who have their premenstrual cycle, right before their menstrual cycle, estrogen is low and progesterone is on its way to coming down. Therefore, levels of that feel good beta endorphin in your brain kind of bottom out, and that can lead to sugar cravings naturally. So you're not blaming yourself. It's not just based on willpower in terms of making decisions, but it is natural hormone functions in the body can drive these things, and becoming more aware of them and more prepared at having things available to you at your home to have for healthy meals and things like that can really help with this, so you're not left making quick decisions when you're feeling a certain way and you just want all the sugar. As far as the same discussion here, but with perimenopause or PMS, the body's attempt to boost serotonin and endorphins, all of that plays a role in sugar cravings naturally. Eating excess sugar without protein, fat, and fiber activates those serotonin feel-good reward centers in the brain, including dopamine and those beta endorphins. So all of those things are just natural. Our bodies produce these neurotransmitters based on eating sugary foods. So the more you eat them, especially without protein, fat, and fiber to help balance all of those things, it's just natural that our bodies like those things. They make you feel good and they make you want more. Ghrelin, I was just going to mention ghrelin as the hunger hormone. It can be affected by the gut microbiome. So if your gut isn't up to speed, up to par, then that can take a hit, as well as leptin, which is what tells your body when you're full. Cortisol, we know, is known as the stress hormone. And then insulin is the fat storage hormone. So sugar can fuel hormonal imbalances by turning off key genes that control your sex hormones, interestingly. But without this gene, which is known as the sex hormone binding globulin, both testosterone and estrogen can become unregulated. And this imbalance causes fatigue, anxiety, irritability, and some other symptoms, which may lead you to feel like you are hungry, but really you're just in need of quality fuel. And so these things happen naturally. It's not just willpower, but becoming very aware of how your body functions and how to fuel it properly can help to conquer these. Now, when we talk about gut health and how that plays a role, it really is a vicious cycle. Dysbiosis, which is an imbalance of bad bacteria. We really want to try to limit the amount of bad bacteria that we're allowing to thrive within ourselves. Bad bacteria thrives on sugar. It eats sugar, it loves sugar, and that's how it continues to grow. It also likes B vitamins. So it depletes your body of B vitamins. And if you're somebody who's already consuming maybe, let's say, a low carb diet, and you're limiting grains and nutritious foods that are rich in vitamin B, then you're already low with those. And B vitamins play a role in energy production and in giving you energy. So if you're already depleted based on low intake, plus you have an imbalance of bad bacteria, that's going to deplete your body more. That's going to just make you feel tired, irritable, have brain fog. It's not going to make you feel great. It's not going to make you want to go out and run and get exercise. It's probably going to make you want to just eat more and, not move and sit and maybe sleep. So as far as additional things that could be going on in your gut, infections like candida or yeast or parasites are things that could be going on that could be causing a ruckus and a vicious cycle of sugar cravings. History of antibiotic use, even one use of an antibiotic can completely wipe out your good gut microbiome. And it can take a while to replenish that back. And how you replenish that back is with a good, nutritious diet loaded in probiotics and fermented foods. But what you don't want is a high sugar, high fat, low fiber diet, because that's the imperfect environment for that bacteria to continue to grow and overtake your willpower for making those decisions that you want to make. So symptoms of dysbiosis include bloating, irritable bowel syndrome, unexplained fatigue, skin condition, colds, infections, acid reflux, so forth and so on, brain fog, and food cravings. So we want to keep the gut with lots of good probiotics and really limit feeding the bad bacteria. The sugar-loving bacteria that I was just talking about do play a role in the gut-brain axis. There's something that's called the HPA axis. I won't get into detail with really explaining that because it's complicated, but there's a lot to it. And this picture just is a quick little example of how the gut and the brain are very much connected, as well as other things within your body, like your taste buds. So you eat something sweet, your taste buds really like it, your neurotransmitters are turned on, and it makes you want more of it. And it's just a vicious cycle back and forth. Sugar can hijack your taste buds. So you have to be mindful of choosing lower sugar sweetened beverages. For example, a big culprit are the no calorie sweetened, sweet flavored like sparkling waters, not just seltzer, but the actual sweet ones that have artificial flavoring in them. They're way sweeter than just regular sugar, anywhere from 200 to 600 times as sweet as regular sugar. So the more your taste buds get used to that sweet flavor, the more you're going to want it. So being mindful of really kind of weaning back on your taste buds for not needing that. The same thing actually goes for salt and sodium, but we won't talk about that today. So the releasing of those hormones like serotonin that make you feel good. Again, it's all interconnected with the gut microbiome, and it affects those appetite hormones like ghrelin and leptin that I mentioned, making you feel hungry when you shouldn't. And it can stimulate the vagus nerve, which may lead to overeating. So it's all connected, and that is just the most simple way to explain it. But since I was just talking about the vicious cycle of sweet taste buds, I think it's important to just note and share the most common types of artificially sweetened products there are on the market. So saccharin is the pink sweet and low that people know about. Equal, the blue label, is aspartame, and then sucralose is Splenda. So if you see on a sparkling water or a cereal or a granola bar or something that says it's sugar-free and or low in sugar, and you see sucralose, aspartame, or saccharin on the list, you know that those are artificially sweeteners, and that they're going to be extremely sweet because they're, like I said, about 200 to 600 times as sweet as regular sugar. Now, research says that although the artificial sweeteners were developed as a sugar substitute to help reduce insulin resistance and obesity, data suggests that the effects of artificial sweeteners actually can contribute or may contribute to metabolic syndrome and the obesity epidemic, and that they appear to change the host microbiome, so your gut, your entire microbiome, and lead to decreased satiety and alter glucose homeostasis, and is may be associated with an increased calorie consumption and weight gain. So if you think about it, your brain is consuming something very sweet, and all of the enzymes that your saliva creates, your digestive system creates, to act on breaking down that quote unquote sugar, but there's no carbohydrates there for it to break down. It certainly has an impact on your neurobiology. So I will just explain that. And I think ultimately we all should be reducing our consumption and need for those very, very highly sweetened sugar flavors in general. If you are sensitive to sugar, and maybe you know that you have insulin resistance, it's not a bad idea to just start looking at consuming lower glycemic foods over higher glycemic foods. And one of the examples that really gets me is carrots. Carrots have this bad rap, as do bananas, for being high in sugar, and you shouldn't eat them. You should absolutely have a banana, and you should absolutely have some carrots. Now, if you have diabetes, you have to be mindful of the amount of carbohydrates you're consuming, but those are very nutritious foods, and they're not to be demonized. No foods really should be demonized, but I think that if you're somebody who is sensitive to sugar and really wants to hone in on improving your metabolic system and reduce any risk of cravings that you might have, then I think that it's important to take a look at incorporating very nutritious, nutrient-dense fruits and vegetables that are just naturally lower in the glycemic index. So you can use that chart there as a starting place for yourself. Certainly it's not comprehensive, but it's a starting point. Now, 75% of Americans are chronically dehydrated. It's been, I don't know how long, but I'm going to take a sip of water. Hopefully everyone has some nice water or some herbal tea with them. Now's the time to have a sip with me. But 75% of Americans are chronically dehydrated. And that, like I mentioned, can certainly alter your mood, make you feel like you are hungry when really you're thirsty. So drinking good old plain water and making sure that you're staying hydrated throughout the day is definitely one of the first places to start, no matter what your health journey is, unless you're on a diuretic, of course, then that's another conversation. So including filtered water is best. Having limiting any of those liquid calories such as soda or juice or anything like that. It's fine to have every once in a while, but it shouldn't really be your go-to. Your go-to should be water. And if you don't like water, infusing it with some fruits and vegetables or herbs. Wintertime, I think, is not that it feels like winter, because it doesn't, but wintertime is generally a time in which water intake decreases. And so I encourage you to get some fruits and some herbs and flavor up your water, and not do that just during the warmer weathers, but also do that in the winter time if you're not already. And then if you are having your reusable water bottle, I do recommend glass or stainless steel. And if you don't have one, you should invest in one so that you're always taking water with you everywhere you go. Out of sight, out of mind. Okay, so nutrient deficiency, I mentioned earlier, magnesium. Here's a picture of magnesium-rich foods on the right-hand side of the screen that would be beneficial to include. Magnesium does tend to be a deficiency for many people and can play a role in sugar cravings. So make sure that you're getting enough magnesium-rich foods in the diet. Can also include cashews, black beans, edamame, whole grains, dark green leafy vegetables, eggs are all options outside of what you see listed there on the screen. Of course, not a comprehensive list, but starting there. I'm going to talk a little bit about magnesium at the end when I talk about supplements, so hang tight on my actual recommendation there for that. Now, foods for a healthy gut always include lots of non-starchy vegetables, an inclusion of nuts and seeds, high fiber foods, legumes as tolerated, and then prebiotic and probiotic foods. I have most certainly talked about prebiotic and probiotic foods, or probiotics, an entire class on that in the past, but really opting for fermented foods daily in your diet is crucial. You can't get probiotics unless you're eating foods that have probiotics in it or taking a supplement, which is fine if you're not consuming adequate amounts in the diet. But you need prebiotic fibrous foods as the food for those good bacteria to thrive within your digestive system. So you can't have one without the other. They are synergistic. You have to be consuming both in order for those good bacteria to thrive and do what they need to do. So want to have lots of those colorful non-starchy vegetables primarily, and then good lean protein source 1 to 2 times a day. That could include a cold water fatty fish like salmon for those omega-3s. Fat and oil, you should have a serving of that a day, and that could be from extra virgin olive oil, avocados, olives. And then, of course, getting in your high fiber starches. A serving would be a half a cup of steel cut oats, for example, or brown rice, or sweet potato, or even some winter squash. And then, of course, we'd want to limit any refined grains as much as possible. Highly refined oils, processed foods in general, added sugars, and alcohol would all be things that you'd want to keep on the limit list. And for anyone who's heard me talk about inflammation or heart health in any of the previous classes, or even the food mood, you've heard me really go into depth about different types of cooking oils and the smoke point of those, and so there's definitely a lot more to be said about that. This is just really the basic guideline for a healthy gut, and so we won't go in too much detail about that. But what I do want to go in more detail about is fiber specifically, and where that comes from, and where you can get your bang for your buck in terms of the amount of grams for each of those. So consuming fermented foods daily, so those would be your probiotic type of food. So fermented kimchi, sauerkraut, refrigerated sauerkraut, yogurts, good quality yogurt, kombucha, tempeh would all be really good options for some fermented foods. And we would want to shoot for all of us, believe it or not, 10 servings of plant-based foods per day. So, vegetables, nuts, and seeds. As far as the fruits, you'd want to opt for a couple of servings of the lower glycemic fruits, ideally. But variety is always key, of course. And so when you're breaking down how much fiber you need in a day, always remember that magic number, your rule of thumb, at least 35 grams a day. 2 to 4 grams for about a half a cup are going to come from fruits and vegetables. 5 to 8 grams for a half a cup, you're going to get bang for your buck with beans and peas. And then you're going to get bang for your buck from whole grains, is going to give you about 3 to 7 grams for a half a cup. And if you're choosing, a piece of bread, or which is considered a processed grain, which is perfectly fine, or, granola or a cracker or something like that, you're going to shoot for about 3 grams minimum for a serving of those. 3 grams would be considered a good source, and then 5 grams on a food label would be considered an excellent source of fiber. There's a lot of words on here, but as far as recapping the really important aspects to reducing your risk of sugar cravings, balancing carbs with healthy unsaturated fat or protein is going to help balance that blood sugar and glycemic response throughout your day. You may need to change up the frequency of your meals, but really focusing on protein and aiming for 20 to 30 grams of protein per meal is going to give you the biggest impact as far as controlling your appetite. And so, you start your day maybe with a high protein breakfast like eggs. Consuming an early meal can help to keep that glucose stable throughout the day. And I'm so curious, and I'm just going to explain this. I'm curious on how many people, don't normally snack at night, but then maybe you do snack at night and you have a treat like ice cream, or, maybe you have maybe if it's in, I don't know, berries and some dark chocolate, something more nutritious. Maybe it's pizza or whatever it is. Maybe you just have a lot of carbohydrates in the evening time and then you wake up hungry. If that happens to you and you don't normally eat at night and then you do eat that and you find that you're starving in the morning, doesn't mean that you have a problem and that you have insulin resistance, but it could potentially mean that you do have a risk for insulin resistance if you are feeling that way. So I recommend that people just eliminate night snacking in general. And it's fine to have a night snack, of course, or dessert, not necessarily a snack. It could be a dessert, but just a natural fast from the last time that you eat a balanced dinner meal, if you have a normal schedule, and then wait until the morning to break that fast is ultimately the best way to control insulin resistance. So I don't recommend going on a strict low calorie diet under 1,200 calories a day. Obviously, we're all different sizes, shapes, activity levels, different weights and heights, and different needs. But that really is a very strict low calorie diet for the majority of people. And just not eating enough calories in your meals can cause you to feel that way. And I put on here, go for cinnamon. Cinnamon has a lot of science to back up that it's beneficial for blood sugar regulation. You could have some cinnamon tea, maybe put cinnamon in your coffee, have some cinnamon coated nuts or pumpkin seeds. Cinnamon maybe mixed with some peanut butter or almond butter, or mixed into some yogurt. If you can see me here, I am a huge fan of these super seed pumpkin seeds. They're made in Connecticut, actually, by a woman named Karen, super seeds, and it's cinnamon flavor. 5 grams of carbohydrate, a couple grams of sugar, 2 grams of fiber, 7 grams of protein, and loaded with zinc, iron, magnesium. Really super nutritious go-to snack there. And then if you're feeling like something, I have it here also. This is one of my favorites. I love this Hue dark chocolate almonds. Slightly sweet, but very satisfying, a good dose of protein and healthy unsaturated fat, and balance of some carbohydrates in there. So nice, sweet, and slightly salty, although only, how many milligrams? This only has 80 milligrams of sodium. They taste salty to me, but I think that's because I've trained my taste buds to not need salt or additional really sweet sugar. If I've ever had, you know, a coffee and there's the artificial sweet stuff in there, oh, I can just taste it. So I think, you know, it's important to train your taste buds not to really need that sweet flavor, but having some good quality dark chocolate as a snack, you know, can be a part of a daily, regular, healthy eating pattern, for sure. There is now going to be a new American plate, and it can look different, obviously, whether you're eating animal-based or you're not. There's a lot of different plates out there, but essentially, you know, probably most of you have learned half of your plate should be fruits and vegetables, a quarter of your plate should be a lean protein, and a quarter should be a whole grain. But this plate here says a third of an animal protein of some sort, and you can see how many amazing fruits and vegetables are on this plate with a quinoa blend there. So 2/3 of your plate being fruit, vegetables, and a whole grain. I keep wanting to say fruit. There's, well, technically, I guess, you know, tomatoes are a fruit. So that's just a beautiful looking plate there with lots of vegetables. And this here just kind of gives a list of other protein sources that you could include. Like I mentioned, 20 to 30 grams at minimum at each meal can come from lean meats, poultry, chicken, fish, could be a plant-based meat, could be eggs or legumes, lentils, beans, tofu, tempeh, which is a fermented food, nuts and seeds, nut butters are all really great options there for including different types of proteins. And I wanted to talk a little bit about this. I feel like when people say they want to snack, a lot of times people's snacks are treats. And I think we need to decipher between a snack and a treat. A treat is more like a dessert. You're treating yourself to, you know, a dessert. And there's no rule of thumb as far as, you know, how many you as your individual self can have as desserts. What one person is eating may be a very different approach in the journey of adapting a healthier lifestyle than somebody else. So just to decipher here, when we talk about snacks and treats, a snack is something that is part of a balanced meal. And here on the screen, you know, it's a nutrient rich, it provides carbohydrates for energy and protein and fat to satisfy hunger. A couple of options on the screen there to mix and match different ideas of things that you could include that most people would probably enjoy that are snacky, like, for example, that would be really nutritious and help to keep you feeling full for longer. Okay, coming back to the treatment protocol, kind of summarizing here some things that we didn't necessarily talk about yet, but I think as far as identifying any underlying functional imbalances, it's important to prioritize and address those things if you are somebody who's struggling with sugar cravings. Lifestyle modifications, first and foremost, that should be addressed is individualizing a stress reduction plan, an exercise plan, your alcohol consumption, and smoking cessation. If that is some, you know, if you're somebody who is smoking, that should definitely be prioritized. Addressing the gut microbiome, including those pre and probiotic foods. And then nutritional supplementation can be personalized based on a physician and the healthcare team. So as far as that supplementation list with science to support, chromium, if you are using, it's generally 200 per day if you are insulin resistant, but it's only likely effective if you're deficient. However, testing for chromium is not easy. So there is a lot of research that supports chromium in helping to reduce sugar cravings. But again, like I said, it's hard to just go, you're not going to go ask your doctor to test you for that. But generally speaking, about 200 a day, if you are insulin resistant, could help. Vitamin D, most people are deficient in vitamin D. Unfortunately, highly recommend that you go and you get tested from your physician to see where you're at and then supplement accordingly. Generally speaking, about 100 to 200, 1,000 to 2,000 international units a day would be fine. And especially in the winter time with not getting out, most people aren't getting out and getting sunlight, which is where you get most of your vitamin D. And if you are taking vitamin D, always remember to take it with a meal that has fat in it, because vitamin D is a fat soluble vitamin. And then magnesium. Talked about a little bit about magnesium earlier. Magnesium is correlated, if deficient, with sugar cravings and a whole host of other things. It's very important mineral in the body that is needed for so many different cellular biochemistry reactions. But it's cumbersome to test also. But generally speaking, 200 to 400 milligrams a day is safe. And it's best to choose a chelated form. And I recommend magnesium glycinate. However, there are multiple forms of magnesium, and it's, I think, a personalized recommendation based on your individual self as far as your symptoms. So there are different forms that can be beneficial for bone health. There are forms that can be helpful for constipation and bowel regulation, for sleep. And of course, in this case, magnesium glycinate is the one that would be recommended for sugar cravings. CoQ10, generally recommended 100 to 200 milligrams a day for metabolic syndrome, diabetes, or hypertensive conditions. And then alpha lipoic acid is generally safe and supports evidence-based research for sugar craving. And again, obviously, any of these you'd want to talk to your doctor about before implementing any of these things. But I wanted to share with you what the research says as far as the safety and efficacy of these for sugar cravings. Now, as far as laboratory evaluation, conventionally speaking, I'm going to assume that the majority of you have had a fasting glucose done in your lifetime. Fasting glucose, like I mentioned earlier, is a way to check to see if your blood sugars are high. If they're high and you're fasting, that could be an indication of insulin resistance, glucose intolerance, prediabetes, or diabetes. Some of you may had your hemoglobin A1C done, and that is a percent value that is given for, and it kind of gives you a snapshot of how well your blood sugars have been controlled in a 3-month time frame. So that is a good indication to see, instead of a one-time shot snapshot of your glucose, but a 3-month snapshot that could tell you a little bit more. However, if you have really highs and really lows, that percentage may be skewed. And so there's an additional test called the HOMA-IR. It stands for Homeostatic Model Assessment for Insulin Resistance. And that's a calculation based on plasma levels of fasting insulin and glucose. It's considered more of an advanced diagnostic value. It isn't generally done unless there is an issue. So I don't think everyone needs to go and get that done, but I just wanted to explain that there are more advanced biomarker testing to show more deeply under the hood what's really going on. What I do think is very important, and I don't know if I should say it should be a part of the standard conventional model, but it's certainly a very impactful biomarker, is the fasting insulin. So fasting glucose gives you a one snapshot, time, in that one moment, what your glucose is. But the fasting insulin can pick up on insulin resistance on more of a, I guess I would say, a cellular level. It tells you if there's a problem a little sooner before maybe a fasting glucose would come up altered on your conventional lab work. So, and then the postprandial insulin level is also something to consider, because you may have normal glucose levels, but your postprandial glucose level drops really low. There are tools for that, which I'm going to talk in just a moment about. I was going on a tangent here. I'll talk about the continuous glucose monitor in just a moment. But first, I want to talk about exercise, and that we all need to be moving more. Period. End of story, right? That's not new news. We all know we need to get up and walk and get some fresh air and get the sunshine for some vitamin D. So you just need to start where you are and start moving more, and make sure that you're getting adequate exercise every day. We need to be managing stress and learning how to breathe better, practice different breathing techniques. You don't have to become the most mindful person who does hours of meditation every day, but a little bit of that would probably make a huge impact on your overall health. So depending on where you are in your journey, as far as understanding how you breathe and implementing breathing techniques, starting with just grounding, putting your feet on the floor and slowing down and breathing in for 5 seconds and slowly breathing out for 5 seconds, and doing that often throughout your day. Maybe you start when you're in just a stressful moment, and then you work your way up to where you do that mindfully throughout your entire day. So this is certainly, there's no easy button for just managing stress, but learning different coping skills for where you're at in your journey in your life, and becoming aware of your triggers, and even to minimize perfectionism, and let go of some of those things, saying no to things that you don't really want to do, and asking for help. All of these things in terms of just managing stress has a great impact on your neurobiology, your biochemistry, your entire body, how your gut and your brain connect with each other, and your overall health. And then sleep. Obviously, sleep is very important. It's underrated, and we really should be aiming for 7 to 9 hours of sleep each night as healthy adults, or just adults in general. We all should be getting quality sleep. And for those people who thrive, or not, I shouldn't say thrive, who run and are okay on getting minimal sleep, research says that people who don't need a lot of sleep and are only sleeping less than 5 hours a day do have higher issues with weight management and diabetes risk and cardiovascular health, and poor cardiovascular health, I should say, poor immune health. And so, these are all really important things to make a priority in your life. And then here, I just am giving a couple of ideas of different suggestions of a healthy meal plan that you can include. So breakfast could be eggs with spinach, topped with some fresh salsa for some additional flavor and extra vegetables. Maybe you have some black coffee, green tea, herbal tea, or a green veggie smoothie of some sort. You could have a snack with some vegetables, any vegetables, with some hummus of your choice, or some natural nut butter, maybe mixed with some cinnamon, as I mentioned earlier, with an apple. Very simple. And then here is just some different ideas of how to put together a combination of a veggie power bowl, building your base, adding your nutritional toppings and different flavors. So you can take a look there, starting with 2 to 3 cups of leafy greens at the top, and then adding in your different vegetables, your smarter carbohydrates, a half a cup of that, and then a half a cup of protein, whether it's from plant-based or animal-based, whichever you prefer, as long as it's a quality lean protein source. And then some toppings, 1 to 2 tablespoons of maybe some pumpkin seeds, some hemp seeds, maybe some herbs, sauerkraut, and then a nice dressing of some sort with a squeeze of citrus, and then maybe a dip of some sort, like a guacamole or a hummus or salsa on top. Oranges would be great now for the winter citrus, for something like that. And then here you got a sheet pan meal of broccoli and sweet potatoes and salmon with some salsa on top. And then an afternoon snack could be some protein hard-boiled eggs with some vegetables. Would be nice and filling. I mean, you've got 2 hard-boiled eggs there, right? So that's at least 14 grams of protein. And then you've got 1.5 cups of raw vegetables. That protein and that volume of vegetables should keep you pretty full. So here is this. If you're struggling and you feel like you're accomplishing all of the nutritional components and lifestyle basics and you're still struggling, then you could prioritize visiting your doctor to get some labs, and maybe consider a continuous glucose monitor. These are becoming very popular now, and they can really tell you a lot about how your body is managing carbohydrates and how your body is managing insulin production. So you can see there on the picture on this person's arm, they have this device that they wear, and it is monitoring through a digital app their glucose throughout the entire day. So you can see how your body responds specifically to what you are consuming. So just recapping here, all of the steps to a healthier you, no matter where you're at in your journey, or maybe you're really struggling with sugar cravings. The first thing first is deciding to quit sugar. I appreciate you all being here, because obviously that means you're interested in learning and you want to gain more information to better yourself or maybe help somebody else. So appreciate you being here just to learn. And then, rethinking what you're drinking, adding in protein every meal, getting in those pre and probiotics, managing stress, getting at least 7 hours of sleep, breathing better, moving your body, sweating, cooking, preparing meals at home, and seeing a qualified practitioner. If you feel like you've really accomplished all of those things and you're still struggling, or even if you're not struggling, of course, you could see a qualified practitioner to talk about how you can take what you're doing and create a personalized approach for becoming a healthier version of yourself. So with all of that being said, I'm going to open up for questions.